The morning Margaret Sullivan arrived in Clearwater, Wyoming, the entire town had already made up its mind about her. Word traveled faster than the stagecoach that brought her, a woman from back east, carrying scandal-like luggage, seeking work in a place that had no room for damaged goods. She stood at the edge of Main Street, her once fine dress now travel-worn and dusty, watching the townspeople whisper behind gloved hands. The general store owner turned his back when she approached. The boarding house matron shook her head before Margaret could even speak. "We don't need your kind here," someone muttered as she passed. Margaret's fingers trembled as she clutched her worn carpet bag. 3 months ago, she'd been a respectable governess in Philadelphia. Then came the false accusation, theft from her employer's wife, a pearl necklace that mysteriously appeared in her room. No trial, no chance to defend herself, just dismissal and whispers that followed her across half the country. By noon, she'd been turned away from every establishment in town. The saloon owner laughed when she inquired about work. "You're that thieving governess from back east. Nobody's going to hire you, miss. Best move along." As the sun blazed overhead, Margaret found herself at the town's edge, where the buildings gave way to endless prairie. Her throat was parched, her money nearly gone. She'd have to sleep rough again, like she had for the past week. That's when she saw him, a weathered man in his 50s, loading supplies onto a wagon. Unlike the others, he didn't look away when their eyes met. "You the woman everyone's talking about?" His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Margaret lifted her chin. "I suppose I am. Name's Samuel Hawthorne. I run the Double H Ranch, about 10 miles north." He studied her with sharp blue eyes. "Well, you look like you could use work." "I've been accused of theft," Margaret said, surprising herself with her directness. "Though I'm innocent, I won't deceive you about what others say." Samuel nodded slowly. "I've been watching how this town treats you. Reminds me of how they treated my late wife when we first arrived. She was Mexican, you see. They called her Unworthy too." He secured the last of his supplies. "I need someone to help with my daughter, Emma. She's 12 and wild as a Mustang since her mother died. Can you handle that?" Margaret's voice caught. Yes, I can. Then climb aboard. We'll discuss wages on the way." As the wagon rolled out of Clearwater, Margaret didn't look back at the town that had rejected her. For the first time in months, she dared to believe her story wasn't over. The Double H Ranch sprawled across the Wyoming landscape like a promise of redemption. As Samuel's wagon crested the final hill, Margaret saw weathered buildings nestled against, rolling grasslands, cattle dotting the horizon, and mountains standing guard in the distance. "It's not fancy," Samuel said, "but it's honest work." A whirlwind of dark hair and fury burst from the main house as they approached. Emma Hawthorne, all knobby knees and fierce scowls, glared at Margaret with eyes that mirrored her father's. "I don't need another governess," she shouted. "Send her back." "Emma Marie Hawthorne," Samuel's voice carried quiet authority. "Mind your manners. Manners are for ladies, and I ain't no lady." Emma spat in the dirt and stormed back inside, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Samuel sighed. "She's been through 8 governesses in 2 years. Most don't last a week. What happened to them? Emma happened. She's got her mother's spirit and twice the stubbornness, put a snake in Miss Henderson's bed, convinced Miss Porter the ranch was haunted, the last one left after Emma, and accidentally let the pigs into her room." Margaret studied the house where her newest challenge had disappeared. "And you think I'll be different? I think you know what it's like to be judged unfairly. Maybe that's what Emma needs. Someone who understands being labeled unworthy." The first week tested every ounce of Margaret's patience. Emma refused to attend lessons, hiding in the barn or racing her horse across the prairie. When Margaret finally cornered her, the girl dumped a bucket of milk over her head. "Why don't you just leave?" Emma demanded, watching Margaret. Wipe milk from her eyes. "Everyone else does." "Because," Margaret said calmly, wringing out her skirts, I have nowhere else to go, and neither do you. Something shifted in Emma's expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. The breakthrough came during a thunderstorm. Margaret found Emma huddled in the barn, trying to comfort an injured calf. The girl's tough facade cracked as she struggled to splint its leg. "I don't know what I'm doing," Emma whispered. "Mama would have known." Margaret knelt beside her. "Then let's figure it out together." They worked side by side, Margaret following Emma's instincts about the animal while offering gentle guidance. When the calf finally stood on wobbly legs, Emma's smile was like sunrise after a long night. "Good, you didn't try to take over," Emma said wonderingly. "You didn't need me to. You just needed someone to believe you could do it." That night, Emma appeared at Margaret's door. "I'm sorry about the milk and the snake that's probably in your bed." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Probably? I couldn't find one today." Emma shuffled her feet. "Will you teach me to read better? Pa tries, but he's not much for books." "I'd be honored." Samuel watched from the doorway as Margaret and Emma bent over a primer together, their heads touching as they sounded. Outwords. For the first time since his wife's death, his daughter's laughter filled the house. "You're not what I expected," he told Margaret later, as they stood on the porch, watching the stars. "Most governesses try to tame her. You're teaching her to harness her own strength." "She reminds me of myself," Margaret admitted. "Too much spirit for what the world expects of a woman." "That spirit will serve her well out here." Samuel's voice grew thoughtful. "It's serving you well, too." 3 months into her time at the Double H, Margaret had found a rhythm, and Emma now eagerly attended lessons, especially when Margaret incorporated ranch work into their studies, calculating feed ratios for arithmetic, reading veterinary guides for literacy, mapping grazing territories for geography. But peace never lasts long in the frontier. The trouble started when Victoria Ashford arrived from Denver. Samuel's sister-in-law swept onto the ranch in a cloud of expensive perfume and disapproval, her city clothes absurdly out of place. Against the dusty landscape. "Samuel, this is unconscionable," Victoria declared over dinner, eyeing Margaret with undisguised contempt. "Harboring a known thief, exposing Emma to such influence. What would Maria think?" Emma's fork clattered to her plate. "Don't you dare talk about Mama." "Emma, to your room," Samuel said quietly. When she protested, Margaret touched her shoulder gently. "Go on, I'll be fine." After Emma left, Victoria continued. "Her assault. I've made inquiries. This woman was dismissed for stealing from the Weatherby family, one of Philadelphia's finest. And you've let her near my niece." "I've stolen nothing," Margaret said steadily, though her hands trembled in her lap. "So you say. But I've contacted the Weatherbys. They're sending documentation of your crime. When it arrives, Samuel, we'll have no choice but to dismiss you." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm taking Emma back to Denver with me. A proper finishing school will correct the damage you've done." "Over my dead body," Samuel growled. "We'll see what the judge says. A single man raising a girl, employing criminals. I think custody will be easily decided." That night, Margaret found Emma sobbing in the barn. "I won't go with her," Emma fierce. "I'll run away first." "No." Margaret pulled the girl close. "Running doesn't solve anything. Trust me, I've tried." "Then what do we do?" Margaret stared at the star-filled sky through the barn door. "We prove I'm innocent, and we show everyone that you belong here, on this ranch, with your father." The next morning, Margaret made a decision that terrified her. She would write to Philadelphia, to the one person who might help, Mrs. Weatherby's personal maid, and Rose, who had been her only friend in that household. While waiting for a response, life at the ranch grew tense. Victoria extended her stay, criticizing everything from Emma's manners to Margaret's teaching methods. She brought the minister's wife to observe lessons, hoping to find fault. Instead, the woman was impressed by Emma's progress. "The child reads Latin," she told her husband, and helps with the ranch accounts. Most unusual. Samuel grew quieter, the strain showing in the deep lines around his eyes. One evening, Miss Margaret found him in his study, staring at a daguerreotype of his late wife. "Maria would have liked you," he said without looking up. "You have the same way of seeing Emma, not as something to be molded, but as someone to be nurtured." "Mr. Hawthorne, Samuel, please." He finally met her eyes. "I need you to know, regardless of what Victoria brings from Philadelphia. Emma, you've given my daughter something I couldn't hope." She smiles again. She learns eagerly. She's becoming the young woman her mother dreamed she'd be. Margaret's throat tightened. "I've received as much as I've given. Emma, save me too. Then we'll fight this together." The letter from Rose arrived on a cold October morning, along with a package from the Weatherbys. Victoria smiled triumphantly as Samuel opened the official-looking documents, but Margaret was already tearing open Rose's letter, her hands shaking. As she read, tears began streaming down her face, not of sorrow, but of vindication. "Read this." She thrust the letter at Samuel. Rose's careful handwriting revealed the truth. Mrs. Weatherby's nephew, Charles, had stolen the necklace to pay gambling debts. When Margaret was blamed, Rose had been threatened into silence, but guilt had finally driven her to confession. She'd enclosed a signed statement and a letter from Charles himself, admitting his crime. Victoria snatched the papers, her face paling as she read. This could be forged." "It's not," Samuel said quietly. He held up the documents from Philadelphia, which included a formal apology from Mr. Weatherby and a letter clearing Margaret's name completely. "You've been wrong about everything, Victoria." Emma burst through the door, having clearly been eavesdropping. "Does this mean Margaret can stay?" "It means," Samuel said, his eyes never leaving Margaret's face, "that Margaret is free to choose her own path without the shadow of false accusations." Victoria left that afternoon, and her threats of custody battles evaporating like morning mist. As her carriage disappeared down the road, Emma whooped with joy, throwing her arms around Margaret. "You're not leaving, are you?" she asked anxiously. Margaret looked at Samuel over Emma's head, seeing in his eyes a question that went beyond employment. "No," she said softly, "I'm not going anywhere. This is home now." That evening, as the three of them sat by the fire, Emma reading aloud from her Latin primer while Margaret mended clothes and Samuel worked on ledgers, the ranch house felt complete in a way it hadn't since Maria's death. They were an unconventional family, perhaps, but a family nonetheless. "Margaret," Samuel said suddenly, "I've been thinking, Emma needs more than a governess. She needs a mother. And I need a partner, someone who sees this land and this life as I do, someone who's already proven they belong here." Emma's reading stopped. Margaret's needle paused mid-stitch. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Margaret whispered. Samuel moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her work-worn hands in his. "I'm asking if you'd consider making this arrangement permanent. As my wife, as Emma's mother, as a full partner in everything we're building here." "Say yes!" Emma burst out. "Please, Margaret, say yes." Margaret looked between them. This man who'd seen her worth when everyone else saw shame, and this girl who'd taught her that broken things could be mended with love and patience. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes to all of it." The wedding took place on a crisp November morning in the small chapel where Maria was buried. Half the town of Clearwater attended. The same people who had shunned Margaret now came to witness her triumph. Emma stood as maid of honor, beaming in a new dress she'd helped sew herself. "Funny how folks change their tune," the minister's wife whispered, "when they realize they were wrong." But Margaret had no room for bitterness. As she spoke her vows to Samuel, she felt only gratitude for the winding path that had led her here. Their first winter as a family tested them in new ways, Blizzards isolated the ranch for weeks. Cattle needed constant tending, and supplies ran low. But they faced each challenge together. Emma learned to help with birthing calves. Margaret mastered the art of preserving meat, and Samuel taught them both to read the weather signs that could mean life or death on the frontier. One particularly fierce night, as wind howled around the house, they huddled together by the fire. Emma had fallen asleep against Margaret's shoulder, and Samuel reached over to brush a strand of hair from his daughter's face. "She's never been happier," he murmured. "Neither have I," Margaret admitted. "I spent so long running from who I was labeled to be, I never imagined I could become who I was meant to be." Spring brought unexpected visitors. A fancy carriage rolled up to the ranch, and Margaret's heart nearly stopped when she recognized Mr. Weatherby himself stepping out. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, hat in hand, "I've come to make amends." Over coffee, he explained that the scandal of his nephew's theft had ruined their reputation in Philadelphia. "We lost everything to Charles's debts. I've come west to start over, and I wanted to apologize in person. What we did to you was unforgivable." Margaret studied the man who'd once held such power over her life. Now he looked diminished, humbled by his own failures. "We all deserve second chances, Mr. Weatherby. That's what the frontier teaches you." Emma, ever direct, asked, "Are you any good with cattle?" By summer, the Weatherbys had settled on a neighboring ranch, and an unlikely friendship had formed. The man who'd once branded Margaret a thief now tipped his hat respectfully when they met in town. The double H prospered. Margaret's education proved invaluable as she helped Samuel modernize their breeding program and expand their markets. Emma grew into a confident young woman who could rope a calf, quote Shakespeare, and calculate interest rates with equal skill. The anniversary of Margaret's arrival, the three of them rode to the hilltop, overlooking their land. The ranch spread below them, larger now, with new buildings and flourishing herds. "Remember when you first saw this place?" Samuel asked Margaret. "You looked like you were afraid it might disappear." "I was afraid I'd wake up and find it was all a dream," she admitted. "That I was still that desperate woman standing on Main Street, being told I was unworthy." Emma, now taller than Margaret, wrapped an arm around her stepmother's waist. "You were never unworthy. They just couldn't see your worth." "Your father saw it," Margaret said, smiling at Samuel. "He believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." "I saw a fighter," Samuel said simply, "someone who'd been knocked down but refused to stay there. This land doesn't care about your past, only about your willingness to work for your future." As they rode back to the house, Margaret reflected on her journey. She'd traveled across a continent seeking escape from shame, only to find that redemption wasn't a place. It was the people who saw your true worth and the courage to become who you were meant to be. That evening, as she helped Emma with a letter to an agricultural college that accepted female students, Margaret smiled at the irony. The woman once labeled a thief was now helping shape the next generation. The governess, deemed unworthy, was now a respected rancher's wife, a beloved mother, and a vital part of a community that had once rejected her. "You're thinking deep thoughts," Samuel observed, joining her on the porch as Emma practiced piano inside. Another skill. Margaret had insisted on blending refinement with ranch practicality. "I'm thinking about labels," Margaret said, "how they try to define us, limit us, and how the right people can help us break free from them." Samuel pulled her close as the sun set over their land. "You were never what they said you were. You were always who you are now. You just needed the chance to prove it." As stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, Margaret knew he was right. She'd been labeled unworthy. But a rancher's faith had changed everything, not by erasing her past but by giving her the opportunity to write a different future. In the distance, a coyote called to its pack, and the cattle lowed in response. Emma's piano music drifted through the windows, mixing with the eternal sounds of the frontier. Margaret closed her eyes and breathed deeply, finally and completely home. The woman who'd arrived in Clearwater with nothing but scandal and a carpetbag had found everything: love, family, purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that she was, and always had been, worthy.